Yeah. Over here. Good evening. Happy Sunday. Hello, everybody. We're hoping that everybody is fine, doing well out here today, hoping you're maintaining your highest quality of mental, physical, and spiritual health as always. And on behalf of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we are humbled and thankful to have you here with us today to discuss this extremely important topic, organization versus mobilization. And as always, when we start, we give thanks to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We acknowledge them and the fact that they have maintained a 528-year struggle to win their land back, because that's what they're fighting for, their land back. And this is their land. If you're not indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, this is not your land. I don't care how many fantasies and myths you want to make up. This land does not belong to you. And you Africans that are claiming this Western Hemisphere, read some books on Africa and understand who we are. So this is not our land, it's their land. And we want them to get their land back, because them doing that assists us in our struggle. And then it's just right, it's just correct. And so we acknowledge them and support them always in their struggle. And we, of course, honor and acknowledge our African ancestors. You know, right now, the people of Haiti are facing unprecedented terror. Even with the history of terror against the people in Haiti, it's unprecedented terror. And Haiti represents probably the most successful revolt against colonialism and slavery in the Western Hemisphere. A clear example of our people fighting back. The 1804 Haitian Revolution, the defeat of French imperialism and colonialism. They have never forgot that. US imperialism and French imperialism have never forgot that. And they continue to maintain neo-colonial structures, and they have for the last 60, 70 years in Haiti, to destabilize that island country in the Caribbean and to make it impossible for our people to move forward towards our self-determination. And so we acknowledge our African ancestors who have always fought for us and always fought to make us, to give us a place and give us stability here, wherever we are in the world today. If you're here, it's because of our ancestors. So when you see people wearing ridiculous shirts like "I'm not my ancestors," like, you don't see any other people other than us wearing stupidity like that. You know, you should be proud of your ancestors because they fought. And if you wear slogans like that, that's because you haven't studied your history, plain and simple. That's all there is to that. So we're thankful for all of you who are here today, and we will go ahead and get started. And just one disclaimer note that I'm so glad that Shukura is here physically with me. We usually do this from different parts of the country, but she's here with me now doing this workshop. And we have our other family member here who is a canine. So you might hear her every once in a while, but you know, any animal that's a part of this family has to be anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, has to be Pan-Africanist. So, you know, they're gonna express their opinions about it. So hopefully that won't be too much of a distraction. And we'll go ahead and get started. just with the brief introductions, again, as I mentioned, this is an All-African People's Revolutionary Party event, of which I've been a longtime member. I've struggled and will continue to struggle to build the party throughout Africa. I've been on the ground there doing that work, Europe, the Caribbean, and of course here in the United Snakes of America. For going on 37 years, I've been a part of this political party and will be one for as much time as I have left. And with me again is my outstanding daughter, Shukura, who grew up in the All-African People's Revolutionary Party's Young Pioneer Institute. So she grew up with the values and actions of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party's Pan-Africanist work. And she's now studying for her doctorate degree. She will be the first person in this family to achieve that objective. And she's studying public health and is an outstanding activist where she lives, primarily with issues impacting African women, indigenous women, and poor women. So proud to do this every week with her, of course. And again, the objective of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party is Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa. The book on the top, Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, that's our guiding light. And in that book, Nkrumah talks about until Africa is free, no African anywhere on earth will be free. And we say that because all of the wealth that you experience in this society, you wouldn't have it were it not for the exploitation of Africa. You could not even be listening to me right now were it not for exploiting the cobalt from the Congo and Mozambique, which powers electronic devices that give or receive signals. So our people are exploited mercilessly to get this cobalt out of the ground so that Samsung and Apple and all of these multinational capitalist corporations can exploit it. So this is why we know that until Africa is free, we will not be free. So that's our objective. And again, as I mentioned, we have chapters all over the world and relationships with other liberation movements. The logos you see there are logos of Pan-African formations on the ground throughout Africa who also accept Nkrumah's objective of one unified socialist Africa. And we work to fuse ourselves with them and to fuse all of these entities into one entity worldwide for Pan-Africanism. And we work closely with the struggles of the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, the Palestinian struggle, the struggle of the people of Ireland to rid themselves of British colonialism, the Filipino national liberation struggle, and all struggles that are designed to bring about justice for people who have had their land stolen and who have been colonized. So we welcome you here today. And to get us started on organization versus mobilization, I will turn it over to Shukura.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. And just to echo with many of what my dad said, I just hope that you all are maintaining some type of safe health and sanity, however you define that, as long as you're not bringing harm to others around you. I also just want to thank you for taking the time out to join us again. And Daddy, the pleasure is all mine. Each Sunday I learn more and more and I grow because I choose to have a growth mindset. And I think that those of you who join us every Sunday also have that. And so I thank you for that as well, because we know from our past ancestors, we cannot grow and no change can truly happen unless we are uncomfortable in terms of learning and growing and enhancing our knowledge. And so that's what we're asking you to do, especially if you already have ideas and thoughts that might conflict with some of the things you hear today. Most people with good intentions who embark upon participating in activist work believe the work and the door to that work opens by, quote, showing up. Although this is objectively true, the method of how, excuse me, the method of how you show up can be very different depending upon the course of action that you take. Excuse me. The purpose of this session today is to define mobilization work. I'm sorry. Right when I start talking, now I have something in my throat. Okay. The purpose of the session today is to define mobilization work, to define organizing work, and to discuss the variances and, more importantly, the different focuses
of those two distinct activist approaches. This is critical discussion to have because the capitalist power structure is determined to ensure that no one realizes that there is a difference. They would prefer that all of us continue to believe, excuse me, that there is only one aspect to activist work, and that is simply showing up. Their reason for wanting us to believe things this way is to ensure they continue to maintain control over every single thing that we do. Our hope is that this session can help people define these different approaches to work in order to determine how to best support both approaches, since both are concrete and necessary methods to engage around issues of justice. We will start with a simple definition of each approach. Mobilization work is defined as work focused on a specific problem, whereas masses of people are brought together to stand against a problem. An example here can be the Black Lives Matter protests. The problem being identified is police terrorism against African and indigenous communities. Everyone who comes to these protests is there specifically to express their outrage at this problem. If you have attended one of these marches, you know that people march next to you sometimes for hours, but you usually will not know their political beliefs. And in fact, you will probably never necessarily see them again after that march. And if you do, it'll only be for another mobilization march or something along those lines. Whereas you will still learn nothing about them. This is a characteristic of mobilization work. The objective is to get large numbers of people together specifically to express a concern, usually against a problem. Historically, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a great mobilizer. He helped spearhead some of the largest mobilization events in history, i.e. the standoff on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, in the USA in 1965, and the March on Washington in August of 1963. If you look at the March on Washington, for an example, there are 250,000 people assembled to express outrage against racial segregation as policy in this country. As previously stated, most of the people there came, heard the speeches, expressed their point of view against segregation, and left, never to work with and to contact the people they participated with that day again. This isn't a problem. It was obviously a great event as the message against segregation reverberated across the world, which was the objective, just like the message against police terror reverberated after Mike Brown in 2014 and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor in 2020. Plus, most of us benefited from mobilization work to introduce us to the struggle for justice. Whether it was civil rights marches, the Occupy movement, or Black Lives Matter, this is true. This introduction is important because these mobilization events help to establish the consciousness around issues. For example, everywhere today you hear about capitalism. It wasn't that long ago that no one dared say the word capitalism openly because of the ideological dominance of the Cold War between the US and the former Soviet Union. To talk about capitalism was seen as evidence that you supported the Soviet Union, which meant destruction to your career aspirations, the safety of your family, and anything else that puts you in threat or harm's way, or your family in threat or harm's way. Although many organizations defied this, including our AAPRP, on a routine basis, the Occupy movement helped make the critique against capitalism much more of a mass conversation. The same is true of the concept of police abolition. Black Lives Matter has made that much more of a conversation. The fact these conversations are convoluted and misdirected, we'll discuss more shortly. Since mobilization work is focused on the against and there is no singular ideological focus on solutions, typically mobilization work includes people who are pursuing all types of objectives. On police terror, that usually means some of the police abolition, some for defunding the police, some for reform like body cameras, community review, etc. So yes, mobilization is important work, and people like Dr. King were great mobilizers, but Dr. King, was not an effective organizer. In comparison to mobilization work, Organizing work is much more about working towards an objective and not just expressing outrage against a problem. As a result, we suggest that organizing work's highest manifestation is when it's focused around revolutionary organizing, which is driven by a single revolutionary ideology. This is a fundamental difference from mobilizing work, which we stated has no common ideology. Also, as we stated, most of us came into activism work through mobilization work. So as a result, most organizers, even revolutionary organizers, will maintain strong mobilizing skills, i.e. the ability to generate a mass of people around an issue. But the difference is organizers have an additional set of skills against building specific capacity to achieve objectives. Malcolm X is a great example of this. He was very strong at engaging in street corner rallies against white supremacy, but his work didn't stop there. He and the people he had with him would collect names and follow up with people, talking to them about joining the Nation of Islam. Based on this follow-up, a key tool for organizing work, many of those folks did join the Nation of Islam, and Malcolm was able to make a huge contribution towards growing the Nation of Islam into a national organization. And although his mobilizing work could have been focused against police terror, as it often was, he still had the objective of recruiting people into the nation by helping people accept that the Nation of Islam's political and religious philosophy was the answer to our people's problems. Again, by comparison, Dr. King and his organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, also known as the SCLC, didn't use their mobilization events to recruit people into the SCLC, as Malcolm did with the NOI, because the SCLC's mobilization had the focus on the problem and not a collective solution, as Malcolm said, the Nation of Islam program when interacting with the masses of people. The All-African People's Revolutionary Party engages this revolutionary organizing work. Our focus on getting people engaged in capacity building work because we are building towards a revolutionary objective, and you cannot have revolution without revolutionaries. So we embrace the organizing approach by bringing people consistent programs like these weekly workshops. We ask you every week, if you are African, to join the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. And many people have so in our work. The workshop is not the end all, but the beginning of building a relationship, which, like Malcolm, will hopefully evolve into people committing to the African Revolution. If you are not African, every week we encourage you to start or join an organization, and we offer our support. And we are having many people take us up on this work with organizations, share their work study circle process templates and other organizing mechanisms with them to solidify those relationships and help them build organizing capacity. Another difference is, since organizing work is about relationships and capacity building, it in no way is dependent upon the institutions of the capitalist system, i.e. police reform, healthcare reform, etc. Many of those important issues the mobilization work is centered upon. Organizing work doesn't require the capitalist media attention that mobilizing work relies upon. Dr. King and the SCLC were very dependent upon the media to help them publicize their events. Even today, BLM wants media attention for their events because, again, they are trying to awaken consciousness around a problem. Organizing work presupposes that people participating in that initial work are already aware of the problem and are interested in expanding towards specific solutions. So the work doesn't need the media. It only needs people to work with and develop. So revolutionary organizations like the All-African People's Revolutionary Party are never going to be in the media. And you shouldn't be so programmed by capitalism that you only value that in which capitalism raises up. In other words, just because something isn't in the capitalist media doesn't mean it isn't critical to building capacity to advance humanity. Another way to think about that is to think about how most of the time everything we see in the media is not truthful and is not based on truth. So that's another way to think about that. And again, just because you don't see it doesn't mean it isn't consequential or it isn't happening. Organizing work has created the foundations for some of the most significant work that we have experienced. Take the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, also known as SNCC, and their day-to-day organizing work with building the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which led to them building the Lowndes County Freedom Organization in Alabama, and that paved the way to the Black Power movement, which personified the overwhelming advancement of consciousness, not only among African masses, but the masses of people, period, in this country, because before the Black Power movement, everything in this country, to how you looked, dressed, spoke, etc., was uniform. And the model being followed was that of the petty bourgeoisie European model. The Black Power movement came out and smashed all of that, which opened the door for the women's liberation movement, the LGBTQ movement, the ableist movement, etc. Even the American Indian movement credited their inspiration to the Black Power movement. So here's a strong example of the power of organizing work to impact long-ranging and reaching changes based on building relationships, capacity, and consciousness. Thank you so much for bearing with me. Again, I apologize for my respiratory issues.
Thank you, Shukura. No problem. We made it through. And thank you for your contribution. And we'll just continue to build on that when we'll talk about good organizing and also good mobilizing work. So first point is, yes, you know, both forms of work are valuable and important. So please don't leave here and say, well, they said that mobilizing work, they're against Black Lives Matter. They did not say that, so don't tell that lie. We said both forms of work are important. And we talked about organizing work being a stepping up of the game, if you will, above mobilizing work. And we'll prove that. So we can use the same example to demonstrate that point. So take a protest against police terror. And what you're wanting to do with that protest is go out on a freeway and you want to block the freeway. This happens all the time, right? Many of us have participated in those types of demonstrations. I know that I have numerous times, and I'm sure many of you have as well. And I'm sure some of you on here, like the police, you come undercover and do it. So we all have some experience with it. So when that happens, from a mobilizing perspective, what takes place is you have information that there's going to be a rally because some African or someone got killed by the police unjustifiably. And so you're going to show up at that location. That's all you know. That's all you know. So you go there and then people give presentations, people talk, people get fired up, and then there's a march. You may have known there was a march. You may not have known it. If you know anything about these kind of events, a lot of times you don't know what's going to happen. And so oftentimes impromptu, there's a march and the march takes off. You don't know where the march is going and it ends up at the freeway. You don't know what's going to happen. And then some people decide we're going to take the freeway and they just go out on the freeway. Again, this is wonderful work because the objective, as Shukura stated, of mobilization work is to raise consciousness about a collective problem. So by going out on the freeway, the media comes, people say, okay, they're out there because they're protesting this unjustified killing of an African or whoever. And so the objective in that sense is met. The mobilizing objective is met. But since this action and these things that take place, 99.9% of the time, they're spontaneous, as the model I just gave, attempted to demonstrate. Then what happens is that you go out on the freeway and people stay there for a while, and then life starts to happen, if you will. People have to go to work. People have to pick up their children. People get hungry. People get tired. People have to use the bathroom, whatever the case may be. And eventually the police know this. So what they do oftentimes is they just wait it out. And the longer it goes, you're not going to stay out on the freeway, indefinitely. And so once the numbers get to the point where they can manage it, then they move in and they shut the action down. Great action, wonderful work, but that's the limitations of mobilization because oftentimes it's a spontaneous approach. And so you don't have the level of organization to sustain it. And so it'll last for a few hours, maybe even a day, but then the capitalist system sends in their agents and then it's shut down. The reason why we say organizational work is a higher level of work, because you can take the same example, but you can approach it not from a mobilization standpoint, but from an organizational standpoint. So police terrorism, all right? You plan out a rally. You plan out what you're gonna do. So what does that mean? So maybe if you're organizing it, you might plan 2 or 3 rallies in different parts of town. You might plan something that's what do you call it? A decoy that has nothing to do with what you're doing. Like when I lived in Portland, Oregon, and we planned our first action years ago to move people back in their houses that they had been evicted from. What happened is that we had a partnership with white organizers in Portland. And what those wonderful white organizers did is they held a press conference in downtown Portland. And they had all the press come. Again, don't be confused. We didn't need the press. We were using, this was a decoy. So well, I thought you said organizing doesn't use the press. You're not listening. So we just used the press. And so we had the media go down there, and these white organizers told them, so we're gonna seize some property. And they did the press conference in front of an abandoned building. So the inference was that this abandoned building was going to be the property that was going to be seized. Now, we did that because we didn't want the police to have any idea where the actual action was going to take place. So that's an example of what I'm talking to you about, is that you might have 2 rallies that have no proximity to the freeway. And then you have a third group of people who are organized to go to the freeway. But those people are not just spontaneously walking out onto the freeway. You have people organized in large vehicles to block off the freeway, to drive on the freeway and block it off, turn their vehicles and block. You have people out with flares and everything, let people know so nobody gets run over. And then you have a team of people to run out there, and they stay out there, and they might be organized enough to chain themselves to the freeway, chain themselves across the freeway. And then you have shifts of people. You organize shifts so that those people are out there 3 hours, then you got another group ready to come in. And don't say that this can't happen, because it's happened. It's happening. If you say that, you don't understand the history of struggle and resistance. This what I'm talking about, I didn't come up with this. This is from understanding the history of struggle and how it took place. One of the tactics that took place, say for instance, with the taking over Wounded Knee by the American Indian Movement in 1972, 73. They were there for several months, you all, and they stood up against the full onslaught of US terrorist intelligence agencies, FBI, ATF, all of those terrorist-lettered organizations. They were able to sustain that because they had food lines. They had people sneaking in food. I know this because my organization, I wasn't around then, but proudly, they were some of the people who helped bring food into the folks in Wounded Knee. They were even able to have Mary Crodog had a baby there. She had the ending results of her pregnancy and had her baby born there because of the level of organization. So don't say it can't happen. It's already happened. We just have to figure out how to take it to the next level. So you're out on that freeway, you've got reinforcements, you've got food to feed people who've been sitting out there 3 days. If just that little, just what I just described, that little infusion of organization, that little infusion of building relationships, talking to people, planning, that's not even a lot, just a little bit, you all. And with that, now you're in a position where you don't just have capacity to shut the freeway down for an hour or a few hours. You can shut it down for days, for weeks. Now, what that brings into play is you have the ability to shut this system down, because now you're fooling with the commerce. The trucks can't get through. There's 5,000 people on the freeway. The cops can't pull them all off. And if you have high-level organization, even if they pull in the National Guard, you have people elsewhere to take up the attention of the National Guard. This is what's been done, you all. This is how you do it. So now you have a situation where the power structure has to listen to you, has to talk to you. I mean, that's just from a mobilization. We're revolutionaries, so we're not trying to talk to the power structure. Many of you on here are not revolutionaries. You want to talk to the power structure. So we're just trying to help you do the work that you say you want to do. If that's what you want to do, that's the way you do it. If you really want them to listen and you have power at the table, if you have what I just described going on, that gives you power during the conversation. It's not just they're listening to you complain and nothing's going to happen, which is what always happens right now because you don't have any power in what you're doing. So that's an example of the difference between, you know, mobilization work and just some level of organizing work. You know, so the key organizing components are organizing work deals specifically with relationship building. So unlike mobilizing work where Shukura described, you march with people you don't even know, when organizing work, your objective is to build relationships. That's your specific objective. And what that means is that you have to spend a lot of time with people, getting to know them, engaging in ideological struggle with them. I have a joke that I've told for years. I spend 95% of my life around people that I don't agree with. And that's a beautiful thing because anybody can be around people that you already agree with. That doesn't take any effort, and it certainly doesn't build any capacity because you're already on the same page. We have to recruit people into this work. So I'm always around people. I'm not around people who believe in revolutionary Pan-Africanism. Most of the time, they're anti-communist. They're anti-organization. They don't even want to be in an organization most of the time. Those are the people that I need to be around because my work is in helping them, struggling with them ideologically based on principles of justice. And I've, for years, been able to bring people around based on doing that work. So relationship building, that's what it's about. And it's not about, oh, they have to agree with what I'm saying, because if you know anything about the AAPRP, our primary message is join some organization working for justice. So we don't even like people, well, I don't agree with that. Okay, then start the I don't agree organization and do whatever you think needs to be done. But you got to do something. So relationship building, that's what it's about. You start the I don't agree organization, I'll help you start that organization. Because it's not a set trip, it's not gangbanging, we're trying to get free. So we know until the majority of people are in organizations, we won't be free. And I know most people watching this now, there's a lot of people on here right now. And I bet you 75% of the people hearing this are not in organizations. And you don't think you have to be in an organization. And you can't point to one example in history where people on a collective level have liberated themselves with the majority of that population not being organized. That has never happened, you all. That has never happened and it never will happen. So relationship building is a key component of organizing work. And follow up. You know, you can't make promises to people and not follow through because that destroys your credibility. When you meet people and you're like, okay, we want to follow up with you and we want to talk to you and we want to, you know, do further work with you, then you have to follow up with them. You have to say, I'm going to meet you at this time and place, and I'm going to do this. I have 5 or 6 meetings like this a week, you all, every week with people I don't know. I met them somewhere and I'm like, well, are you interested in this? Let's get together and talk. I have a meeting tomorrow with somebody I've never met before. I do this. This is my life because I'm trying to organize people. And if they don't want to join the APRP, that's great. But maybe I can help them facilitate whatever kind of organizing work they want to do. But they're going to get that message. So follow up is key. Like, I'm not going to flake on the person I have the meeting with tomorrow. This is essential to the work I'm trying to do. So follow up. So if you're a flaky person, organizing work is going to be difficult for you. And a lot of you all are very flaky. So organizing work is going to be difficult for you because you don't have the ability to hold yourself accountable. And accountability is a key component to organizing work. And then having that objective focus, like again, like Shukura said, organization is about an objective, achieving an objective. So making sure you have that clearly. So, you know, the reason why more people are not engaged in organizing work, there are a lot of reasons, but the 2 primary reasons are that organizing work is a lot more difficult. That's what makes it higher level work. It's a lot more difficult. It's easy to just show up at a demonstration and just march and go home. You don't have any, you can stay. If the demonstration is 5 hours, you can decide you only want to stay an hour and a half and you can leave and you're not accountable to nothing or nobody. You can do whatever you want. It's not helping us get free, but you're able to feel better. And for a lot of us, that's really all we really care about is us feeling better. We don't really want to solve the problem. But if you want to solve the problem of oppression in this society, then that means doing the steps that we're talking about here. And that takes a lot of work. It's very, it requires an intense degree of humility. You will be constantly disrespected. And most of us just don't have, you know, we're just not ready to deal with that. And so that's why the organizing work, you know, doesn't happen to the same degree, because it requires that level of discipline. And we don't, you know, we don't want to have that. We just want to float in and out of it as we see fit. And, you know, that's why we got to understand the difference between the work, because a lot of us out here think floating in and out as we see fit is the exact same thing as people who dedicate their lives every day to liberation work. And it's not the same thing. I'm sorry to bust the bubble, but it's not. And we need a lot more people in that latter category than we have right now if we're ever going to get free. And so for those of you who, because I don't want, well, they said I got to be for revolution and I'm not for that, so I don't want to listen to nothing they have to say ever again. No, we're not saying that. We're saying join some organization working for justice. And if you don't have one, start one. So if your thing is more, you're like, well, I'm a capitalist, even though my bank account is overdrawn, we ain't mad at you. Continue to believe that you're a capitalist, continue to believe that you can find justice in the system. We're not even having that debate with you if you don't want to have it. If you want to have it, we're happy to show you where you're confused. But if you don't want to have it, we're not even arguing with you. We're just saying you got to do something and you got to do it with other people. So if mobilization is your thing, then here are some tips on how to make the mobilizing work stronger. Okay. So first thing is mobilization doesn't have to equal spontaneity. Just because it's a mobilizing effort does not mean it has to be spontaneous. There can be some planning involved, you all. And I gave the example of the freeway. That's mobilization planning. There can be some planning involved. You can do that. And all it will do is make your mobilization efforts so much stronger. So in other words, we should get away from this belief that, you know, if we sit down and have a meeting to plan something, that's authoritarian. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. And it's really a ruse to me that people who don't really want to be accountable advance, and it gives them cover to advance that. You know, planning is always good in your life. You know, the old African proverb, the more you sweat now, the less you'll bleed later. That makes perfect sense. Nobody can dispute that. And when you've planned something out and you've prepared yourself, you're always going to be in a better position than if you don't do that. So there isn't really any argument against planning, even in mobilization work. So include that in the mobilization work. And then mobilization should always include political education. You know, this concept we have where people show, you know, you go to the marches, right? Beautiful marches, beautiful people, beautiful objective of getting people together to talk about issues that need to be talked about. But if you go around and talk to people at the march, some people there are socialists, some people are anarchists, some people are in the Democratic Party, some people may even be in the Republican Party, some people may be libertarians. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing. But how do we address that? So what we say is that if you really are committed to what you believe in, let's struggle. Let's have ideological struggle together. Let's have ideological struggle together. Let's struggle over ideas. Because if you're serious about justice and bringing justice to humanity, then that should be more important than whatever you believe. And if I hear something today that makes more sense than what I already know, I'll accept it today. I don't have any commitment to any dogma. What I have a commitment to is what I genuinely believe will solve the problem. So let's have ideological struggle. Let's put it all on the line. Let's see what happens. And so that requires mass political education. And you can have that even in mobilizing work. Like the example here, when we were taking those houses back in Portland in 2012, 2013, when I was up there, we began, and I was largely the person that initiated this, like we should have some political education. And so we began to do that. We began to have seminars. I remember the one couple that were out in East Portland where the police, they were living in a cul-de-sac, and the police kept driving in the cul-de-sac and threatening us. And there were like 40 people at the house. And whoever, some of you listening may have been there, or you may remember that. It was all in the news. We had a seminar in the driveway, the people's house in the driveway, 40 people. I had everybody read an article by Secretary called The History of Class Struggle. And we talked about it. I mean, you know, 90% of the people didn't read the article, and they still had a lot to say about it because we're not disciplined with political education. You know, and I remember I had to tell several people, like, just here's the article. We got copies, just read it. I don't need to read it. I'm like, well, then you don't even know how to spell Secretary. So why would I want to listen? I mean, at least be honest about the discussion. So we gotta do the work to create the conditions where we see political education as important, because it's critical. Because a lot of the times, like people who participate in Black Lives Matter or Occupy or whatever, you come to a point, you're studying a situation, and what happens? You get to a point where you're like, I think that this is what needs to happen. Now you're looking at solutions because you've engaged in some level of education to drive you to that point. So that's the process we're talking about, you all, when we say political education. We're not talking about catechism. We're not talking about forcing you to believe something you don't want to believe. We're talking about engaging in an organized process to combat the backward capitalist propaganda that's beamed at us 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. If you don't have something you're engaging in to combat that, you will believe what they beam to you, whether you realize it or not, whether you understand it or not, it will still happen. I mentioned at the beginning, Africans wearing shirts that say, I'm not my ancestors. That's capitalist propaganda that you're wearing when you wear something like that, because you have not studied your own history. You have not engaged in political education. So you believe the enemy's analysis that they could just brutalize us and we never defended ourselves. Many of you listening, that's your interpretation of history, is that we never had any agency and white people just brutalized us and we just had to take it. I know that's what you believe, because whenever you see like Proud Boys or somebody out there, you talk about, well, POC are scared. I don't know what POC you know, but the ones I know ain't scared of no damn Proud Boys. Send the Proud Boys where we are. We'll show them what proud really looks like. We ain't afraid of no, we've been dealing with white supremacists for centuries. So we know our history. We're not gonna bow down to no white supremacists. White supremacists better have a good life insurance program. And that's for those of you white supremacists listening right now. So know your history, and you get that through political education. There is no other way to do that. No other way. We will never tire of saying that because it's the truth. And if you have something that you think is more true than that, then come on with it. Let's have that ideological struggle. We would love to have that struggle with you. So mobilization work, you know, even with that, you can develop the mechanisms to advance political concepts through the participants who are engaging in your work. If you do these things that we're talking about right here, you can make those things happen. And all that will do is strengthen the work that you're doing. That's all it will do. It will not take anything away from you. It'll just strengthen it. And again, with mobilization, you should always, always, always have a push for people to join organizations. I think one of the most lost opportunities is when you have a demonstration, you have 5, 6,000, 10,000 people come and people just leave and you don't have any contact with them. Some of those people want to do some additional work other than just coming that day. And we need to be organized to help make that happen, because the more people we can get engaged, the stronger our work becomes. So even if you have a spontaneous demonstration, hopefully you don't, hopefully there's some planning, but have a push for people to join organizations so that way we can begin to bring more people over to the side of working for justice and not just talking about the need for justice. So how do we make organizing work stronger? And so here we have what we have here is, this is our All African People's Revolutionary Party ideological training guidelines. So this document, it's a 13-page document. And the purpose of this document is to show you how to build a political education process. And so, we are always willing to share this with people. Like if you're African, you join the AAPRP, this was a part of what you have to study. You're African, you don't want to join AAPRP, but you want to join some other organization. Okay, you can use our model to help you as a template. You're not even African, but you want to engage in organizing work. You can use our model as a template. We've provided this to many people. And if it helps you build organization, that's what it's for. So the organizing work, it's essential that, we're doing the internal work to ensure that we have a healthy space to carry out the work to its highest degree of productivity. So what that means is that we have to ensure that principled ideological struggle is central to our work. We can't have liberalism, passive aggressiveness. You can't have those, you can't allow those things to fester in the organization. And this is why we did a workshop about this, Shukura and I, but you have to abandon this premise of attacking people on social media. All you're doing is helping the enemy when you do that. You're showing them where the weak points are in the movement. If you have a problem with somebody, have the courage to confront them with the problem. If you don't want to do it alone, take people with you. But the problem has to be with the people who are the source of the problem. That's how we get stronger. How does it make you stronger? Because when you confront the problem directly, the people you're confronting have to respect you for doing that. And oftentimes, because of that respect, that will help them develop whatever they need as an internal dynamism to change the behavior. Because you're creating a culture where that's anticipated, that's expected. And that makes our organization stronger, and it stops making us so susceptible for police sabotage, because we don't make it as easy for them to know the contradictions that we're experiencing. So this is the type of internal work that we should be carrying out within our organizations. And, we should all that are in organizations, we should see that as our responsibility. If you want to do New Year's resolution, your New Year's resolution should be, I'm going to engage in principled ideological struggle with my comrades in 2021 and beyond. I'm not going to see something and then get mad and then have an attitude. What's wrong? Nothing. And then talk about those people to other people. And, those of you that they're talking to about these other people, you don't have the courage to tell them, why are you talking? When somebody comes to me talking to me about someone else, the first thing I say is, well, did you take that to them? Well, then I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I do that on my job. I had these people organize a meeting in Vacaville, California, and they had me there. We were at a Big Bear Diner at 7 o'clock in the morning. This is my job, okay? And they said, well, we came here to talk about such and such. And I'm like, well, where is such and such? Well, they're not here. I'm like, well, then I'm eating my food and going to another table. I'm not talking about that person. I said, that's cowardly of all of you all to do that. You should talk directly to them, whatever the problems are. And then we ended up talking, and then we eventually did that. But that's what's necessary. It helps make you stronger. It's very essential. And making sure we make that commitment to have a strong foundation in our organizations. That means making sure we understand what the organization is pushing for. And I say that because in my experience organizing in the AAPRP, what I've seen is that people come in and we have a work study process. We have a political education process, and you have to attend this every 2 weeks. You have to read. You have to read a minimum of 70 pages every 2 weeks. And people don't want to do that. They don't want to engage in struggle. We have criticism, self-criticism, which is a major part of what we're talking about right now, because it's a tool to help us build collective accountability to one another and to the people we're serving. And people don't want that. People that don't join organizations, you don't want that. You don't want to be accountable. So people they come to one meeting, they don't even read most of the time, and then they don't come back. And then A year passes, and all of a sudden, they're telling people, yeah, I was in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. I don't like that. And I've seen people do that countless times. And I tell them, like, stop telling people you were in the APR. You were in the APRP for as long as it's taken me to just tell you this. You know, so you don't even know what you're talking about. And all you're doing is to work for the police. How am I working for the police? Because you're talking against one of our organizations where people are sincerely working to organize our people for justice. And you didn't even spend long enough in the organization to defecate. And so that's working for the police, because you're driving people away from the work that we're doing. And you're doing that just because your ego is too large to admit that you don't have the discipline to do this work. So don't be that person, you all. Please don't be that person. Make sure you understand what your organization is about, and that you all are learning that collectively, and that you're engaged in trying to break that down so that you can communicate it effectively to people, because that's how you're going to get people on board. And always prioritize relationship building, you know, with the strong follow-up. When you tell somebody, let's talk next week, then do that. Reach out. And don't do things, if you can't, like whatever I don't know what people do, but whatever you're doing, if it impacts your memory, don't do it. If you got to get a notepad and carry it with you and a pen and write down what you set up, then do that. Do whatever you need to do. You need reading glasses, I got them. Do that. Whatever you need to do that so that you can be consistent. You know, as Kwame Ture said, if you're not consistent, we don't have to deal with you. So if you tell somebody I'm going to meet you, and then you don't even show up, you don't even say anything, you don't even say, hey, I can't make it, nothing, then you've wasted all that time that the person put into you. You wasted it. And that's to me, the biggest crime is being ungrateful. Somebody gives you your time. I'm trying to be very honored with time. That's why we say these are hour workshops. They go an hour. They don't go an hour, 15 minutes. They don't go an hour, 30 minutes. They go an hour, because we respect your time. So if we tell you we're going to meet you next week, we're going to meet you next week. And don't be dishonest. Like, people will they'll sign a sign-up list, and they'll write chicken scratch that even a chicken can't read. And then if nobody contacted me, well, nobody can read. Even if we hired a linguistics expert and a handwriting expert, we wouldn't have been able to make out what you wrote. So make sure that you are being accountable to yourself. When you fill that out, write it so that people can read it. And I guarantee you, if you do that to us, we're going to follow up with you. I've had all kinds of experiences with this, you all. I tell people, yeah, I'm going to call you next week. I'll call you Saturday, 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock comes, I'm waiting by my phone. I'm calling you. And then you don't answer the phone, or somebody else answers. Well, it's such and such there. Well, they're not here. Who? And I hear you in the background. Who is it? Ahjamu. Oh, it's John. No, Ahjamu. Oh, it's John. I don't know nobody like, okay, don't be that person. Don't be that person. You're wasting our time. We want to work with people who want to do the work. Don't waste time. You're taking time away from us building our capacity. If you're not serious, just say, like, well, you know, I like all this. It gives me a high hearing this talk at the event. I get high from hearing it, and I want that high, but that's really all I'm after. Okay, just be honest and say that. At least I respect that. Well, what about that? Well, they just want to get high. That's fine. Let them do that. But we won't waste time, you know, trying to follow up and do all that, because that's what happens a lot of times. So, you know, approach every day seeing the work as your responsibility. So, you know, I've been in the APRP a long time, but I still continue to have certain practices that I engage in that to me are designed to respect my comrades. One of those things is, if I identify a problem, I always will come with some level of suggestion as to how to address that problem. If I say, like, I think we should do this, then I'm coming with, and here's how I think we should do it. Now, what I come with, they may say, brother, you are absolutely insane. And that's fine. But they cannot say, well, all you do is just talk about what needs to happen. But when it comes time to make it happen, you're nowhere to be found. And a lot of you, that's who you are. You're good in meetings at talking about what needs to happen. And the meeting time is up. And it's like, okay, we got to move. Well, I just need to say this. And then You do that all the time. And then when it comes time to, so how are we going to make this happen? Oh, it's time for me to go. I got to go. I'm not available anymore. I got to go. Well, are you going to help us put this together? I don't have time. Oh, you had time to spend all that time talking about it, but it's somebody else's responsibility to make it happen. That's not serious, y'all. You're not serious. That's what you're telling those of us who are in this work. When we see that, we know you're not serious. All you want to do is just have the attention on you. And nothing against that. You can do that. You know, you can Facebook Live and talk and do that. And the 3 or 4 people who watch you, you can have all that. You can do that as much as you want. But for those of us who are trying to create revolutionary conditions, please don't waste time. Don't be that person. Because that's, if we engage these things the way we were talking about, it does make our organizing work so much stronger. So the last thing we want to say is, again, as we always say, we want to invite you, if you're African, to join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And every time we say that, somebody writes, well, why is it just African? Look, if you haven't, this is what we're talking about. If you haven't spent enough time studying the African anti-colonial movement, that you don't understand that, that's why you haven't gotten a response, okay? Because it's not our responsibility to educate you about something you should know. If you're coming around African people and African movements, you should know that. Otherwise, go somewhere else, because you're just sucking up our energy. You're not gonna sit here and explain this to you in 2020 and beyond. Like, we're not, you know, the history of Europe is not the history of the world. Just because Europe has a problem with nationalism, that's Europe's problem. That's white people's problem. That's not our history. So we're not gonna, you know, fit into your definition of how the world should look. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to organize our people. And that's what we're gonna do. So read some books. We give you every week resources to do that, and you don't do it. So you're not serious. So we're not gonna waste our time with you. So we're saying, if you're African, join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And if you don't want to join the All African People's Revolutionary Party, join some organization working for justice. And you have here AAPRP-INTL.org. And that is the address to write to if you want to join the AAPRP. So please do that. There's also so much information about the Pan-African world, what's happening in the Pan-African world. So you definitely, you know, want to be able to get that there. And also, I write a blog, A Better World.me, Ahjamu Umi's Truth Challenge. I invite you to come on there and check it out. I posted an article this week, a couple of days ago, entitled Marcus Garvey, J. Edgar Hoover, and the Firestone Corporation, you know, the tire company people. And so, you know, you should check that out, because it gives you the history. If you want to understand what we're talking about when we say capitalism was built on Africa's wealth, that article was just one in many examples of that. You know, Firestone has a 100-year contract in Liberia right now. And all of that happened because of the sabotage that was carried out against the Garvey movement in the 1920s. So check that out. And there's other articles like that, and as well as, you know, all these videos are posted there. And then hoodcommunist.org is a collection of African revolutionaries from various organizations. All African People's Revolutionary Party, Black Alliance for Peace, Black Hammer, all of these organizations write for hoodcommunist.org. And so you should definitely check out that space. I'm privileged to have a lot of what my work published there, along with many other wonderful people. So do that. So if you're not African and you want an organization, again, we will give you the templates. We will work with you and help you get organized so that we can strike a blow for justice. So we thank you all for joining us today. We want to again ask you to keep your thoughts for the people of Haiti. They continue to attack our people. You know, Haiti is African people. You know, the slave ship dropped them in Haiti. It dropped me here. That's the only difference. So I probably have biological relatives in Haiti, because when they did that, they did, oh, were you, let's see, you're in the Mandinka, so you stay over there. We got all the Mandinka. We want to make sure we're really committed to making sure they all get to the same place together. No, that's not what happened, you all. So every African is my family. So Haiti, those are our people, and they're being viciously assaulted. So please, if you pray, if you have good energy vibes, do that. But even higher than that, do those things, but get organized, because that's how we stop this kind of stuff from happening. Get organized, get in organizations, and engage in creating capacity so that we can defeat these people once and for all. And next week, join us. We're going to actually build on what we talked about today. Organizing effectively in 2021. Best tips, best practices for organizing effectively in 2021. Next Sunday, December 27th, from 4 to 5 Pacific Standard Time. So we want to wish you a great Sunday afternoon. Those of you that celebrate Miss Christ, we want to wish you a good week. The capitalist merchant holiday at the end of the year, so you'll spend more money. Be careful, don't spend money you don't have. Get with your family and build relationships. Get with your friends and build relationships. Get with the people you know virtually and build relationships. That's the best gift you can give them. And that's exactly what they need. It's the gift that keeps giving. Organization is the gift that keeps giving. So 2021, our theme should be let's get organized. Have a great rest of your day. Forward ever, backwards never. We always are struggling for revolution.